The doctor said the mass near my pancreas might leave me only 3 days. My wife squeezed my hand, leaned close enough for her perfume to cut through the hospital disinfectant, and smiled. Finally, she whispered, 3 more days, then it's all mine. My stepdaughter glanced toward the hallway and said, I'm taking his car. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just stared at the white ceiling tiles above my bed and listened to the blood pounding behind my ears. It was 4:17 on a Tuesday afternoon at Riverside Methodist Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Outside my room, rubber wheels squeaked across the polished floor. Somebody's television was playing too loud down the hall. A nurse laughed at something near the station, and for a second the whole world sounded painfully normal. Inside that room, mine had just split open. A few minutes earlier, Dr. Daniel Price had stood at the foot of my bed with a tablet pressed against his chest. The CT shows a mass near the pancreas, he'd said. There's also a serious infection. We need a biopsy and more testing before we know exactly what we're dealing with. My wife, Vanessa, didn't ask whether it could be treated. She asked, are you saying he could die this week? Dr. Price paused. Doctors pause when they're choosing which truth you can handle. If the mass is what we're concerned it may be, and if the infection continues to spread, his condition could decline very quickly, possibly within days. 3 days, Vanessa asked? I can't give you an exact number, but 3 days was what she heard. 3 days was what she wanted. After Dr. Price left, she sat beside me and performed concern for about 30 seconds. She smoothed the blanket across my stomach. She touched my forehead. Then she looked at my closed eyes and decided the pain medication had taken me somewhere far away. That was when she whispered it. Chloe's comment about my car came right after. Not just any car either. A 1972 Corvette Stingray, dark blue with a rebuilt small block engine and cream-colored seats. Margaret and I had bought it in rough shape in 2006. We spent weekends restoring it in the garage, arguing over paint samples and eating takeout on overturned buckets. Margaret was my first wife, my real partner. She died 11 years before that hospital room, after 37 years of marriage. I still had a photograph of her sitting behind the wheel of that Corvette, grinning like a teenager with grease on one cheek. Chloe knew what that car meant to me. That apparently made no difference. Vanessa rose from her chair. We should let him rest, she said. The two of them stepped into the hallway, but the door didn't close all the way. I'm serious about the Corvette, Chloe said. You can have the house. The house isn't yours to give away. It will be yours soon. Vanessa lowered her voice, though not enough. We'll need to speak to a realtor, not immediately. That would look bad. What about the furniture? Most of it goes, especially that awful leather couch. Chloe laughed. And the funeral? Small. There's no reason to spend a fortune. Their footsteps faded. I looked down at my right hand. Vanessa had been holding it less than a minute earlier. The skin there still felt warm. That was the part I couldn't understand. How could a hand feel warm when the person attached to it was that cold? I was 68 years old. I had built Bennett Grounds and Property Care from a used Ford pickup, a borrowed mower, and $6,000 I could barely afford to repay. By the time I stepped back from daily operations, we maintained office parks, apartment complexes, medical buildings, and school properties across central Ohio. I wasn't fabulously wealthy, but I had done well. I owned my home in Worthington, held investments, and still controlled most of the company. Vanessa knew that before she married me. We met at a library fundraiser 4 years after Margaret died. Vanessa was charming without appearing to try. She remembered people's names. She laughed at my old stories. She told me she admired men who built something with their own hands. What I didn't admit back then was how lonely I'd become. I used to sit in my truck at the end of the driveway because I didn't want to walk into a silent house. I left the television on during dinner just to hear another human voice. Some nights I drove around the neighborhood twice before going home. Vanessa didn't just offer companionship. She offered noise, movement, another coffee cup beside mine in the morning. I saw warning signs, of course. Most people do. We just rename them because the truth is inconvenient. She asked whether I had updated my beneficiaries. She suggested selling 2 rental properties so we could enjoy what we'd earned, though she hadn't earned them. She disliked the Christmas bonuses I gave longtime employees. Chloe called me dad whenever she needed help with rent or credit card debt, then disappeared for weeks. Vanessa often asked what the company might sell for after I was gone. When I looked uncomfortable, she'd touch my arm. I'm only thinking about our future. Lying in that hospital bed, I finally understood whose future she meant. Around 7 that evening, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Miguel Alvarez wore an old brown work jacket and muddy boots. He carried a paper cup from Tim Hortons in one hand and his faded Cincinnati Reds cap in the other. "You look terrible," he said. I almost laughed. "You always know what to say. That's why you keep me around." Miguel had worked beside me for nearly 30 years. Calling him my gardener never felt quite right, though technically he still maintained my property. He had supervised crews, trained young workers, repaired equipment, and once slept in a chair outside Margaret's hospital room because he didn't think I should be alone. The summer after she died, he cut my grass every Thursday and never sent a bill. He took one look at my face and set the coffee down. "What happened?" "Close the door." He did. I told him what the doctor had said, then I told him what Vanessa and Chloe had said. Miguel sat in the chair beside my bed, turning his cap slowly in his hands. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "She thinks you're already gone. Maybe I've been gone for a while and didn't know it." He looked toward the hallway. "What exactly did the doctor say?" "Not what she heard. What did he say?" I repeated the words as carefully as I could. A suspicious mass, a serious infection, a biopsy still needed. No confirmed diagnosis. Miguel leaned forward. "My brother had pancreatitis 6 years ago. First scans scared everybody half to death. They thought it was cancer until the specialist reviewed it." "You think that's what this is?" "I think you don't surrender your life before they finish the tests." Vanessa had already told the nurse she wanted to discuss comfort-focused care. She'd called more procedures unnecessary suffering. Miguel's jaw tightened when I told him. "That decision belongs to you." For the first time since Dr. Price entered my room, I felt something besides grief. It wasn't hope exactly. More like a small door opening in a room I thought had no exit. I reached over and gripped Miguel's wrist. "Help me," I said, "and you'll never have to work another day." He looked offended. "I'll help because you're my friend. We can argue about money when you're alive." Then he pulled out his phone. "I know the specialist who treated my brother. She's at Cleveland Clinic now." He stood and walked toward the window for better reception. As he made the call, I looked at the clock. 3 days. A few hours earlier, I had believed that was all the time I had left. Now it was the time I had to find out whether my wife was preparing to bury me or whether she had simply exposed herself too soon. Miguel made the first call from the corner of my hospital room, speaking quietly while I watched the hallway. Vanessa could come back at any moment. That was the strange part. I wasn't afraid of the mass anymore. I was afraid of my wife walking in and realizing I had stopped behaving like a dying man. Miguel ended the call and came back to the bed. "Dr. Sloan can review the scans tonight," he said, "but she'll need the full imaging file, blood work, and the doctor's notes." "How do we get those without Vanessa knowing?" He gave me a look. "You're still the patient, Walter." It was such a simple answer that I almost felt embarrassed. For 4 years, Vanessa had slowly trained me to act as though every decision needed to pass through her first. What we ate, where we traveled, which checks I signed, which friends were too exhausting. Somewhere along the way, I had confused avoiding arguments with keeping peace. I pressed the call button. A nurse named Camille came in a minute later. She was in her 40s with red-framed glasses and a badge reel shaped like a sunflower. "I need copies of my records sent to a specialist," I told her. "Of course, we'll need you to sign a release." "Only me?" She glanced from Miguel to me. "You're the patient. As long as you're able to make your own decisions, it's your authorization." I felt something settle in my chest. "Then bring me the form." Camille left and Miguel smiled slightly. "One step?" "One very small step. Small steps still get you out the door." The door opened before I could answer. Vanessa came in carrying a canvas tote bag and a look of controlled concern. Chloe followed behind her, staring at her phone. "What door?" Vanessa asked. Miguel didn't miss a beat. "Front door at his house. The hinge has been sticking." Vanessa looked at him for half a second too long. I didn't realize Walter was discussing household repairs tonight. I didn't realize dying canceled maintenance, Miguel said. I had to turn my head so she wouldn't see me smile. Vanessa set the tote on the visitor chair. Well, Miguel, thank you for stopping by. He needs rest now. I'll decide when I need rest, I said. She looked at me. It wasn't anger exactly, more like surprise that a lamp had spoken. Then her expression softened. Of course, honey, I'm only trying to protect you. Chloe finally looked up from her phone. Mom talked to someone about bringing you home. A hospice coordinator, I asked. Vanessa moved closer to the bed. Just someone who can explain the options. You heard the doctor. We don't want your last days filled with needles and procedures. My last days. She said it gently, as if wrapping the words in cotton made them kinder. I haven't had the biopsy yet. Her mouth tightened. The doctor seemed very clear. No, he seemed concerned. That's different. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Vanessa touched my shoulder. You're scared, I understand. I looked at her hand. No, I don't think you do. Camille returned carrying a clipboard. Vanessa immediately turned toward her. What's that? A records release authorization. Oh, for what? I answered before the nurse could. A second opinion. Vanessa's face changed so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. The concern disappeared. Something harder showed underneath. Then the mask came back. Walter, do you really want to put yourself through all that? I want another doctor to look at the scans. But Cleveland is 2 hours away. They can review them electronically. Chloe lowered her phone. Why? If they already know what it is? Miguel stood. They don't. Vanessa turned sharply. This is a family matter. Miguel put on his cap. He is my family. That shut the room down. Vanessa's cheeks colored. Chloe rolled her eyes. Camille looked at the floor, pretending to examine the paperwork. I signed the release. My hand shook, partly from weakness and partly from the knowledge that the first real choice I had made in months had been made against my wife. Miguel left soon afterward, but not before placing his hand briefly on my shoulder. I'll call when I hear something. Vanessa watched him go. Then she pulled the visitor chair close to my bed and lowered her voice. You need to be careful who you trust right now. I almost laughed at the nerve of it. Why? People behave differently when they think money is involved. So I've noticed. Her eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm tired. I closed my eyes. She sat there another 10 minutes. I could feel her watching me, waiting to see if I would explain myself. I didn't. The next morning, she arrived early with coffee, a laptop, and a folder of documents. For anyone walking past, she looked devoted. She arranged my breakfast tray. She spoke sweetly to the nurses. She posted a photograph of our hands together on Facebook with a request for prayers. Then she opened the folder. These are just routine forms, she said, so I can handle bills if you become too weak. I looked at the first page. Durable power of attorney. The second gave her broader access to financial accounts. The third allowed her to speak with business representatives on my behalf. Routine forms. I let the papers rest on my blanket. I'll have Eleanor review them. Vanessa's smile stayed in place, but the muscles around it stiffened. Your attorney, now? She's been handling my affairs for 20 years. You don't need to drag outsiders into this. Eleanor isn't an outsider. Chloe was stretched across the couch by the window, scrolling through listings on her phone. She spoke without looking up. Mom's trying to help you. Then she won't mind Eleanor reading them. Vanessa picked up the folder. You're not thinking clearly. That sentence frightened me more than I wanted to admit. Not because it was true, because I realized how useful it could become if she repeated it often enough. When Vanessa went downstairs for lunch, I asked Camille to contact the hospital social worker and document that I wanted control of my own medical decisions. Then I called Eleanor Walsh from the bathroom, with the sink running so Chloe wouldn't hear from the other room. Eleanor answered on the second ring. Walter? I need you to listen carefully. Her voice changed when I told her about the diagnosis, then sharpened when I described Vanessa's papers. Do not sign anything, she said. I wasn't planning to. I need your physicians to document that you're alert, oriented, and capable of making decisions. I'll also review every existing authorization Vanessa has. Can you come here? I'm leaving now. She paused. Walter, are you safe? I looked at the locked bathroom door. I'm not sure. That afternoon, Dr. Rebecca Sloan called from Cleveland. She had reviewed the images. There is definitely an abnormal area near the pancreas, she said, but I do not agree that the imaging alone supports a terminal diagnosis. It may be an infected pseudocyst related to pancreatitis. So I might not have cancer? You might not, but the infection is serious, and we need tissue results. I strongly recommend drainage, biopsy, and continued antibiotics. I gripped the phone tighter. Vanessa had wanted me home without any of that. How soon? Today, if your hospital team agrees. The procedure happened that evening. Vanessa was furious, though she disguised it as fear. She stood beside the bed before they wheeled me away. You're making yourself suffer for nothing. I need to know. What if the answer changes nothing? Then at least it'll be my answer. 2 days later, Dr. Price entered my room with Camille and closed the door. Vanessa had gone home to shower. Chloe was downstairs getting coffee. Dr. Price sat down. The biopsy found no cancer cells. I stared at him. He continued explaining. An infected pancreatic pseudocyst. Severe inflammation. Dangerous, yes. Treatable with drainage, antibiotics, and follow-up care. I heard the words, but my mind couldn't hold them all at once. I'm not dying? Not from this. You have a recovery ahead of you, but no, Walter, you are not terminal. I covered my face with both hands. For a moment, relief hit so hard it hurt. Then I thought of Vanessa's smile. Chloe claiming the Corvette. The folder of papers. Miguel arrived 20 minutes later. I told him the news and he pulled me into a careful hug. Then we tell them, he said, tonight. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to watch Vanessa's face when she heard it. But Eleanor, standing near the window with her briefcase, shook her head. If you confront her now, she'll say she was grieving. She'll deny what she said. More importantly, we still don't know what she has already tried to put in motion. I looked from her to Miguel. I don't want to spend my second chance playing games. This isn't a game, Eleanor said. It's protection. I sat with that. Then I asked Dr. Price to tell Vanessa only that my condition had stabilized and additional results were still being reviewed. After everyone left, Miguel remained beside the bed. So what now? He asked. I looked toward the hallway, where my wife would soon return and perform another scene of loving concern. Let them plan the funeral. Miguel's eyebrows rose. Why? Because I want to hear what they say when they think I'll never answer back. Walter released me from the hospital 4 days later. Not because I was fully recovered. Because the infection was under control, I could continue intravenous antibiotics at home, and Dr. Sloan had coordinated everything with my doctors in Columbus. Vanessa nearly hugged every nurse on the floor. You have no idea what this means, she said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She sounded like a woman grateful to have her husband home. I knew better. She was grateful because she believed she could control the rest of the story. The November air felt sharp against my face as Miguel helped me into my silver Ford Explorer. You sure you're okay? He asked quietly. No. You physically okay? I'll get there. He nodded. And the rest? I looked toward Vanessa's SUV, where Chloe was already complaining that the ride home would make her late for dinner with friends. I don't know if I'll ever get there. Home didn't feel like home anymore. The maple tree Margaret and I planted 25 years earlier still stood beside the driveway, its last red leaves scattered across the lawn. The porch swing she'd loved still creaked in the wind. Everything looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. Or maybe I'd finally started seeing things that had been there all along. Vanessa hurried inside first. I'll get the guest room ready. I frowned. The guest room? You'll be more comfortable downstairs while you're recovering. The master bedroom was upstairs. So you'll be sleeping upstairs? Well, she hesitated, you need uninterrupted sleep. She had already rearranged my life before I had even walked through my own front door. I'll sleep in my room. She forced another smile. Whatever makes you happy. It wasn't worth arguing. Not yet. The home health nurse arrived that evening. Her name was Denise. She checked my PICC line, reviewed my medications, measured my temperature, and reminded me that recovery would take several weeks. You're going to feel weak, she said. That's nothing new. She laughed. I like patients with a sense of humor. After Denise left, Vanessa watched me swallow my evening pills. You should probably rest. I've been resting for 4 days. You need to save your strength. For what? She didn't answer. Instead, she tucked the blanket around my legs as if I were 98 instead of 68. Anyone watching would have thought I had married a saint. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Old habits die hard. For 40 years, I'd started my mornings before 6. Even after retirement, my body still believed dawn belonged to working men. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I made my way downstairs with my cane, moving slowly enough that the floorboards wouldn't complain. As I reached the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the dining room. Vanessa. Chloe. Neither knew I was awake. The realtor can come next Thursday, Chloe said. Vanessa lowered her voice. Not yet. Why not? People will talk. So? We need everyone feeling sorry for us first. I froze. Vanessa continued. The market's still good. We repaint the living room, replace Harold's old furniture, stage the place properly. We'll get much more. And the Corvette? Sell it. I already have somebody interested. I closed my eyes. Margaret had helped me rebuild that Corvette one bolt at a time. She'd insisted on cream-colored seats because she said they looked happier. After she died, I couldn't even start the engine for almost 2 years. Now Chloe was negotiating a sale before I was supposedly gone. Amna. I quietly returned upstairs before they saw me. For the first time in my life, my own staircase felt like enemy territory. That afternoon, Miguel arrived carrying a rake over one shoulder. Officially, he was there to clean leaves. Unofficially, he was checking on me. Vanessa greeted him with an overly sweet smile. Oh, Miguel, we really don't need yard work right now. He looked around. Leaves don't usually wait for funerals. I almost laughed. She forced another smile. Well, thank you. Miguel spent an hour outside. Then he knocked on my bedroom door. Mind if I check the backyard drainage? Vanessa answered before I could. Go ahead. She had no idea we had used that excuse dozens of times over the years, whenever we needed to talk privately. 5 minutes later, I slowly stepped onto the back deck. Miguel pretended to examine a drain pipe. Without looking up, he said quietly, Eleanor's been busy. How busy? She found 3 requests Vanessa made. I gripped my cane. What requests? She called your bank asking about account access after a spouse dies. I wasn't surprised. She contacted the company's insurance carrier asking who'd become authorized if something happened to you. That one hurt. She also asked your accountant for copies of business valuation reports. I stared across the yard. She moved fast. She planned ahead. Yeah. Miguel finally looked at me. She hasn't actually gotten anything. Not yet. No. He smiled faintly. Because Eleanor stopped every door before it opened. I let out a slow breath. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I felt something close to relief. I.e., that evening Eleanor came over carrying a grocery bag, so it looked like a social visit. Vanessa welcomed her politely. Walter's been wanting company. I've been wanting homemade chili, Eleanor answered. It was the most natural lie I'd heard all week. After dinner, Vanessa went upstairs to shower. Eleanor spread several folders across my office desk. Here's where we stand. She spoke quietly. You're mentally competent. Every physician has documented that. Good. I've revoked every financial power of attorney she'd been encouraging you to sign. What about the old ones? You never actually gave her broad authority. I nodded. Lucky. Not lucky. She smiled. You've always been cautious, even when you forgot why. Then she opened another folder. I also recommend transferring the company into an irrevocable trust before your divorce becomes inevitable. The word hit me harder than expected. Divorce. Until that moment, I hadn't actually admitted it to myself. Eleanor noticed. You don't have to decide tonight. I think I already have. Over the next week, my routine settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. Morning nurse. Medication. Physical therapy exercises. Visitors. Then pretending to nap while Vanessa wandered through the house making phone calls. I learned more during those fake naps than I'd learned in 4 years of marriage. She wasn't openly evil. She was practical, clinical, detached. She spoke about my death the same way people discuss replacing a roof. Necessary, inconvenient, manageable. That somehow made it worse. One afternoon, Chloe invited two friends over. They stood in my garage looking at the Corvette. One of the boys whistled. Your stepdad really kept this thing clean. He worshipped it, Chloe said. Lucky you. She shrugged. I'll probably sell it and finally take that Europe trip. The boy asked, You think that's what he'd want? Chloe laughed. He won't care. Those three words echoed in my head long after they left. He won't care. Maybe she was right. Dead men don't care. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. A few days later, Miguel returned carrying a small rosemary plant. He placed it beside the back steps. Vanessa barely noticed. I did. Rosemary. Our old signal. The first legal documents were complete. One step closer. As he loaded his tools back into the truck, he looked toward the kitchen window where Vanessa stood talking on her phone. Then he tipped his cap slightly. Not a smile. Not a celebration. Just enough to tell me, we're almost ready. That night, as rain tapped softly against the bedroom windows, Vanessa climbed into bed beside me for the first time since I'd come home. She rolled toward me and rested her head lightly on my shoulder. I've been thinking, she whispered. About what? We should invite everyone over Sunday. For what? So your friends can see you, just in case. I stared into the darkness. Just in case. She wanted witnesses. A final memory. Maybe even sympathy before the funeral. I swallowed slowly. That sounds like a wonderful idea. She kissed my cheek. I knew you'd understand. When her breathing finally settled into sleep, I lay awake listening to the old grandfather clock downstairs strike midnight. One slow chime after another. Not counting down to my death anymore. Counting down to the day the truth would finally walk through my front door. By Sunday morning, the whole thing almost fell apart. Eleanor arrived at 8, carrying a leather briefcase and 2 cardboard cups of coffee. She came through the side door so Vanessa wouldn't see her from the upstairs window. Miguel was already in the kitchen, pretending to fix a loose cabinet hinge. This needs notarized, Eleanor said, pulling out the final company document. And the bank still hasn't confirmed the new signing authority. How long, I asked. Could be an hour, could be Monday. Monday is too late. Miguel glanced toward the ceiling. Vanessa was upstairs getting dressed for what she kept calling my farewell gathering. Eleanor lowered her voice. Walter, we can postpone this. No. You're still recovering. Your blood pressure was high yesterday. I know. And once you do this, you can't put the marriage back where it was. I looked down at the papers. That was the sentence I had been avoiding. Not because I wanted Vanessa back. I didn't. But ending a marriage, even a bad one, felt like admitting I had failed twice. First by trusting the wrong person, then by staying long enough for her to believe I could be managed. Miguel closed the cabinet door. You don't have to embarrass her, he said. Just stop her from telling everybody her version after you're gone. I'm not going anywhere. I know that. She doesn't. That was the point. At 9:30, a mobile notary named Carol Jennings pulled into the driveway in a gray Honda Accord. Eleanor introduced her as an old client dropping off paperwork. We signed everything in my office while Vanessa supervised flower arrangements in the living room. My hand shook badly enough that Carol paused. Would you like a moment? I'm fine. She studied me. Can you tell me, in your own words, what you're signing? I explained the employee ownership plan, Miguel's 12% stake, the trust, and the removal of Vanessa from any business authority. Carol nodded. That's all I needed. By 10, the documents were signed. At 10:15, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She read the message and looked at me. The bank confirmed. Miguel let out a breath. For the first time all morning, I did too. Then Denise, the home health nurse, arrived and checked my blood pressure. 168/94, she said. That is not a good number. I'm having company. You're having stress. That too. She looked directly at me. Whatever you're planning, keep it short. I almost asked how she knew. Maybe older people aren't as good at hiding things as we think. By noon, cars lined both sides of the street. Vanessa had gone all out. White lilies covered the dining room table. Framed pictures of our wedding stood beside trays of sandwiches and pasta salad from the church ladies. A slideshow ran silently on the television, showing 4 years of vacations, holiday dinners, and smiling photographs of Vanessa and me. Margaret was nowhere in it. Neither were the early days of the company. 40 years of my life had been edited down to the years Vanessa had occupied. Pastor Thomas Reed arrived with his wife. Barbara and Jim Collins came from 2 houses down. Calvin brought 6 longtime employees, including men who had worked with me since the 90s. Chloe showed up late wearing black, though I was still alive. Her boyfriend Evan followed her into the garage. I heard her whisper, "Don't touch anything. That car's basically mine now." Calvin heard it too. He looked at me, then at her, but said nothing. Vanessa moved through the room accepting hugs. "She's been so strong," Barbara told me quietly. I looked across the room at my wife. "Yes," I said, "she has." Around 1:30, Vanessa tapped a spoon against her glass. The room settled. She stood beside a large photograph from our wedding day. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Walter wanted the people he loves around him while he still has the strength to enjoy it." I had never said that. She placed one hand against her chest. "These last few days have taught me how fragile life is. Walter gave me a home, a family, and a future. He always said he wanted me to remain here, surrounded by the life we built together." Eleanor stood near the back wall, expressionless. Vanessa continued. "He also trusted Chloe to help protect his legacy." Chloe lowered her eyes like a grieving daughter. That nearly made me laugh. Then Vanessa said, "I know Walter would want the company to remain with family." Calvin's head lifted. There it was. Not grief. Positioning. She was building a story in front of witnesses. I pushed myself out of the chair. Miguel moved toward me, but I shook my head. I wanted to stand on my own. The room went quiet when I stepped forward with my cane. Vanessa smiled. "Oh, honey, you don't have to." "Yes," I said, "I do." I faced the room. "Thank you for coming. Vanessa asked all of you here to say goodbye." Several people looked down. "Before anybody does that, I need you to hear what I heard." Vanessa's smile vanished. Miguel picked up the small speaker from the bookshelf and pressed play. My wife's voice filled the room. "Finally, 3 more days, then it's all mine." Nobody moved. Then Chloe's voice. "I'm taking his car." A third recording followed. Vanessa and Chloe discussing the realtor, the furniture, and how little they intended to spend on my funeral. The final clip was Vanessa saying, "We need the papers signed before he starts asking questions." Miguel stopped the recording. Silence pressed against the walls. Vanessa recovered first. "This is disgusting," she said. "You recorded private conversations?" "I recorded conversations I was part of," I said, and Miguel saved things said in front of him. "You were drugged, you were confused." Eleanor stepped forward. "Walter was examined by 2 physicians. Both confirmed he was fully competent." Vanessa pointed at Miguel. "He put you up to this. He wants your money." Calvin spoke from near the fireplace. "Then why did you ask me for the company valuation last Wednesday?" Every face turned toward her. Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Pastor Reed folded his hands. "You invited us here to honor Walter," he said quietly. "Let him finish." Chloe pushed through the crowd. "You promised me the Corvette." "When?" "You said someday it would be mine." "I said someday we might work on it together." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." Her face twisted. "You're not even my real father." The room went still again. That sentence should have made me angry. Instead, it made me tired. "No," I said, "but I tried very hard to be one." Chloe looked away. Vanessa stepped toward me. "You're punishing us because we were scared." "No, you weren't scared. You have no idea what I've been through." "I heard what you've been through. Furniture choices, a realtor, a cheap funeral." She lowered her voice. "People will think you're cruel." I looked around the room. They can decide for themselves. Her eyes filled with tears, but I had seen her produce them too many times. "This whole performance," she said, "while you're dying." I gripped the cane and straightened as much as my body allowed. "You're right about one thing." She waited. "There isn't going to be a funeral." I explained the biopsy, the infected pseudocyst, the treatment, the fact that I was weak but not terminal. Vanessa's face drained of color. Chloe stared at me. You're not dying? No. It wasn't relief that crossed her face. It was panic. Vanessa looked toward Eleanor, then back at me. What did you do with everything? I held her gaze. Nothing you didn't give me a reason to do. Vanessa didn't answer me right away. She stood in the middle of the living room with everyone watching, one hand pressed against the back of a dining chair, as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Maybe it had. For the first time since I'd met her, she had no prepared expression. No soft smile, no careful tears, no gentle hand on my arm. Just fear. What did you do? She asked again. I looked toward Eleanor. She nodded once. So I told them. Not every legal detail. Nobody had come to my house on a Sunday afternoon to hear a lecture about trusts and ownership agreements. The company won't pass to Vanessa, I said. Most of it is being sold to the managers and employees who helped build it. Miguel's receiving the ownership share he earned years ago. Miguel stared at the floor. He hated being praised in public. The rest of my business interests have been placed beyond anyone's reach except the people and programs they were created to support. Chloe folded her arms. And the Corvette? It'll be auctioned. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. It's my car. You knew I wanted it. Yes, I said. That became very clear. A few people looked away to hide smiles. The proceeds will fund skilled trades training for veterans and young workers who can't afford tuition. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa stepped closer. What about the house? You'll receive whatever the law and our agreement entitle you to, no less. She waited. And no more, I added. That was the moment she understood. I hadn't left her destitute. I hadn't hidden money or committed some desperate act that a court could easily reverse. I had simply stopped rewarding her. There's a difference. Vanessa looked around the room, perhaps hoping someone would defend her. Barbara Collins stared at the carpet. Pastor Reed had his lips pressed into a thin line. Calvin stood beside two longtime foremen with his arms crossed. Nobody stepped forward. That seemed to hurt her more than anything I had said. She picked up her purse. Come on, Chloe. Chloe didn't move. What about my things? We're leaving. For where? Vanessa turned on her. I said we're leaving. They walked out together. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the wedding photograph on the side table. Miguel looked at it. Loose hinge, he said. A surprised laugh moved through the room. It was the first honest sound anybody had made all afternoon. The weeks after that were not clean or satisfying. Real life rarely ends when the villain walks out the door. Vanessa hired a divorce attorney within 48 hours. She claimed Miguel had manipulated me. She told mutual friends I had become paranoid after my hospital stay. She demanded another mental capacity evaluation and questioned whether I had understood the documents I signed. So I sat through interviews. I answered the same questions again and again. What day is it? Who is the president? Can you explain your assets? Do you understand the consequences of divorce? I wanted to say yes, better than I understand the consequences of marriage. I kept that to myself. My doctors confirmed I was competent. The notary provided her notes. Eleanor had documented every decision carefully. The recordings remained useful, not because they proved a crime, but because they made Vanessa's claim of devoted concern difficult to believe. Still, the process wore me down. There were nights I considered paying her whatever she wanted just to make the calls stop. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by legal envelopes, my antibiotic pump resting beside my chair. I could give her more, I told Eleanor over the phone. Buy myself some peace. No, she said, you'd be buying silence. Peace is different. I looked out the window at the bare maple branches. What if I'm just being stubborn? You're allowed to protect what you built. That sounded simple. It wasn't. Men my age are often taught that providing means never closing the door, even when someone keeps carrying pieces of your life through it. The divorce took 5 months. Vanessa received the share of marital property she was legally owed, a payment set by our prenuptial agreement, and enough time to remove her belongings from the house. In return, she gave up all claims against the company, the employee plan, and the trust. At the final meeting, she sat across from me in a conference room in downtown Columbus. She looked tired. So did I. Before signing, she asked, "Did you ever love me?" I thought about our early dinners, the mornings she made coffee, the years I had tried to believe we were building something together. I loved the person I believed you were. She lowered her eyes. Then we signed. Chloe contacted me 2 months later. Her message said Vanessa had pressured her and that everything had gotten out of hand. There was no apology, just an explanation. I wrote back once. I told her I had cared for her as a daughter. I also told her she was 29 years old and responsible for her own words. I said my door was not permanently closed, but there would be no car, no checks, and no rewards for pretending we had a relationship. She never answered. Maybe someday she will. Maybe she won't. Miguel officially retired from physical fieldwork that spring, though retirement didn't suit him. 3 weeks later, he was back at the company training new hires on equipment safety and irrigation systems. At the first employee meeting under the new ownership plan, Calvin announced the Miguel Alvarez Service Award. Miguel leaned toward me and whispered, "This is embarrassing." That's why I approved it. You're a terrible friend. I've been told worse. The Corvette sold at a charity auction for more than I expected. The money helped launch a training partnership for veterans and young adults entering landscaping, mechanics, and construction trades. The scholarship carried Margaret's name. That mattered to me. By May, the doctor said the infection was gone. I still tired easily. My right knee hurt when it rained, and some mornings my hands shook enough that I had to set down my coffee. I didn't become younger because I survived. I became more careful. I put Margaret's photographs back in the living room. I hired help for the house but kept control of my own accounts. Once a month, I taught a class on small business basics at the training center. One afternoon, Miguel and I watched a group of apprentices plant young maples along the fence. He nudged me. 3 days turned into a pretty busy year. I looked at the trees, thin but upright in the spring wind. It did. Getting older doesn't mean accepting disrespect because you're afraid of being alone. Sometimes the hardest boundary to set is the one that saves what is left of your life. If you've ever had to protect your dignity later than you should have, you're not alone. Share what the experience taught you, and remember the people who stay when there is nothing to gain.